On a winter morning in East Texas, 10 days before his 19th birthday, a young man dialed for help from a trailer parked under a gray Rusk County sky. He told authorities he found his fiance's baby girl dead, alone, beyond saving. The girl was completely unresponsive. But by sundown, the story inside that trailer would change. A missing hour would fill with a talk of demons, an exorcism, and a crime so brutal that seasoned professionals called it the worst they had ever seen. This is a story of Blaine Milan, of a 13-month-old named Amora Carson, and of how a small Texas case grew into a long legal battle about faith, science, and who was allowed to be put to death. It is December 2nd, 2008. The setting is a trailer in Rusk County, Texas. The kind that sits off a rural road where the nearest neighbor is more rumor than presence. Inside lived an 18-year-old boy named Blaine Milan, his fiancée, Jesseca Carson, and Jessica's 13-month-old daughter, Amora. That morning, Blaine called the police. He told them he found Amora dead. When law enforcement arrived, what they saw was nothing peaceful. It was a tiny body marked by violence, injuries everywhere, and enough chaos in the trailer to suggest a struggle that did not end quickly. At first, the story is simple and almost ordinary in its dishonesty. Blaine and Jesseca said they left Amora alone for about an hour. They returned to find her dead. This is in their fear voices. But there is also distance, as if they are replaying a script they agreed to recite while in panic. Texas Ranger Kenny Ray sits with Blaine in the front seat of his patrol car moments later. An hour-long conversation in the cramped, sunlit interior. A 19-year-old on the edge, appearing somewhat confused, and a ranger trained to hear the cracks in a story. For now, the narrative holds. The couple claims they were gone, that something terrible happened while they were away. But the scene itself is louder than Blaine's words. Back at the Rusk County Sheriff's Office headquarters, where both were driven to, while not under arrest, only to clear things up, the calm of the initial story begins to break. Away from the trailer, away from the immediate shock, Blaine and Jesseca change what they say happened in Amora. The new version is darker and stranger. They speak of demons. They say the baby girl had become possessed, and that what unfolded in that trailer was not simple abuse, but an exorcism gone deadly. Outside of their words, investigators would start to resemble something colder, a timeline. Surveillance footage from a pawn shop and a gas station shows a couple at times, walking in and out. What they described does not match these original claims. A pipe wrench is discovered hidden in a hole in the master bathroom floor, later linked through forensics to the injuries of Amora. Blood-spattered bedding, diapers, and clothing suggest not a sudden discovery of a lifeless baby, but a prolonged and violent ordeal. The autopsy performed at the local Justice of Peace facility in Henderson confirms what the scene already whispered. Amora's body carried multiple severe injuries, including human bite marks across her small frame, broken ribs, and evidence of extreme violence. A professional who has seen countless tragedies calls it the worst case of brutality he has ever encountered. By the evening of December 2nd, the illusion of a mysterious death has evaporated. Both Blaine Milan and Jesseca Carson are charged with capital murder and led from the sheriff's headquarters in handcuffs to the Rusk County Jail. In their mugshots, they look like grown-ups when really they're pretty young. They just had that extra growth gene. And Blaine Milan, he was a big guy. The next day, on December 3rd, the story leaves the cramped hallways of the sheriff's office and walks into the formal language of a courtroom. Blaine and Jesseca appear before Judge Bob Richardson in the Rusk County District Court. Prosecutors being District Attorney Michael Jemerson and Texas Assistant Attorney General Lisa Tanner confirmed that the state is pursuing capital murder as a charge against them. The judge sets bond at $2 million, a number high enough to make freedom a theoretical concept only. This ensured that both Blaine and Jesseca would remain behind bars to await trial. The judge as well ordered that a grand jury from their court review the evidence in order to confirm the capital murder charge or maybe modify it. The case went before a grand jury at the Rusk County District Court. The grand jurors do what grand jurors often do in capital cases. They confirm the most serious charge, but leave room for lesser included offenses as well, in case something happens at trial. They did end up confirming the capital murder, but they also included those lesser offenses being felony murder and another felony for injuring their child. The prosecution, however, chooses to move forward with capital murder as the main charge to punish them. Soon after, standing before Judge Clay Gossett, Blaine and Jesseca both plead not guilty to the charge of capital murder. At this point, the prosecution confirmed that they would be unsealing that indictment and would be pursuing the death penalty. Behind those words lies more history. In August 2008, just months before Amora's death, Blaine had pleaded guilty to an unrelated sexual abuse charge and had been ordered to register as a sex offender. After turning 18, Jesseca received an insurance settlement connected to her father's death in 2001, money that would help explain some of the couple's movements and choices in the months leading up to the crime. These two were not good people. They were evil. Their baby is gone. And the poor couple, who for a time being did not get away with their lies, face the possibility of living the rest of their life in state custody or being killed by the state. At this point, Rusk County, a small and rural area, suddenly is spotlighted because it is too small to contain what comes next. By May 2010, Blaine Milan's case had outgrown the country where it began. His mugshot was being displayed on national headlines, and everyone in Rusk County knew who Blaine Milan was, as well as what he was being accused of. To avoid juror bias from heavy local publicity, the trial was moved to the Montgomery County District Court, quite far from Rusk County. Therefore, Blaine was transferred to the Montgomery County Jail at this point, in order to be close to the courthouse where his fate would be decided. Judge Clay Gossett moves on with him to Montgomery County in order to work in that court and preside over the trial. The prosecution presents its case: the trauma of Amora's body, the hidden wrench, the inconsistent stories, and the chilling claim that a supposed exorcism was used to rationalize what happened. Graphic evidence is shown. The air in the courtroom grows heavier with each clinical description. As in many capital cases, the defense moves for a directed verdict, a request for the judge to step in and say, "This evidence is not enough." But Judge Gossett denied that motion, ruling that the jury should indeed decide on a verdict. There are motions for mistrial, focused especially on the bite mark testimony, evidence that the defense will later call junk science. At this stage, though, the judge denies those requests as well, allowing the jury to hear it all. On May 17th, 12 jurors and 2 alternates returned their verdict: guilty of capital murder. The lesser charges automatically fall away, overshadowed by the more serious one. 10 days later, on May 27th, the same jury recommends a sentence, the most severe one: death. Judge Gossett immediately accepts their recommendation and sentences Blaine Milan to die and be sent to death row. Later, motions to throw out the death sentence or redo the punishment phase are rejected by that judge. In this relationship, a baby's life has ended, and now another life is put into a long, slow countdown to death. The Grim Reaper approaches. In April 2011, it is Jesseca Carson's turn to sit at the defense table and go to trial. Unlike Blaine, she will be tried in Rusk County in front of the same judge, Gossett. The evidence unspools again. It is so disturbing that during closing arguments, at least 2 jurors are seen crying. Both Blaine and Jesseca had a jury of 12 members and 4 alternates. The photographs in Jessica's trial, the medical testimony, and the description of what Amora endured is almost more than the courtroom could hold. On April 13th, the jury returned a verdict of guilty on capital murder, immediately rejecting the lesser options with that severe conviction. The prosecution has the power to seek the death penalty, but chooses not to. The state cites a lack of evidence to justify the ultimate punishment for Jesseca. Instead, she is sentenced to life in prison without parole, immediately by Judge Gossett. Jesseca is shortly after transported to the Whitman unit in Gatesville for evaluation, and is later on taken to her permanent facility, the Hobby Unit in Marlin, Texas. Her world shrinks to cells, walkways, and the echo of a crime that will follow her name forever. Judge Gossett denies her motion for a new trial. She appeals, but in early 2013, just before Groundhog Day, the Texas Court of Appeals in Texarkana affirms the decision for Judge Gossett not to acquit her, and as well refuses to grant her a new chance before a jury. Since then, her appellate path has gone quiet, and she has had no success in overturning that conviction. For Blaine, the path is different. After sentencing, he is temporarily housed at the Byard Unit in Huntsville for evaluation, and then transferred to Texas's death row at the Polonsky Unit. Years pass, measured in lockdown routines, legal filings, and weekly phone calls. His father, Tom, calls and speaks with him until July 14th, 2020, when Tom dies after a decline in health. His mother, Shirley, would visit him weekly until November 22nd, 2023, when she also passed away. Her health had also worn down over time. The people who knew him before the word capital attached itself to his name slowly disappeared. Outside the prison, the case becomes part of a larger conversation. Werner Herzog's series On Death Row devotes a 2013 episode to Blaine Milan, bringing cameras and questions into this East Texas tragedy. The story is sometimes compared to the 1976 German case of Anneliese Michel, another deadly exorcism, a parallel that Strawberry Ink listeners already know well. I covered that case too last year or earlier this year, I can't really recall. But On Death Row is available on Tubi for free if you're interested. Inside, Blaine lives with the knowledge that the state fully intends to carry out his death sentence in 2010. A death sentence is not just a verdict. It is a process, a long series of attempts to pull the emergency brake on a train that has already started moving. Blaine's direct appeal, after being rejected by his judge, reaches the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals in Austin. On May 23, 2012, the court affirmed both his conviction and his death sentence. The United States Supreme Court later on would be asked to intervene and did hear the case, but refused to overturn the death sentence nor conviction either. Alongside these direct appeals, Blaine filed a habeas corpus petition, one at the state level and the other at the federal level, arguing that something has gone wrong, that his trial and sentence are unconstitutional. His first state habeas corpus petition focuses on trial errors, but later lawyers criticize it for failing to highlight an issue that may have changed everything: his claimed intellectual disability. After the Supreme Court's decision in Moore v. Texas, which reshaped how courts must evaluate intellectual disability in capital cases, Blaine raises what is known as an Atkins claim, arguing that he is exempt from execution. The Texas Court of Criminal Appeals grants stays in 2019 and 2021 to consider this claim, pausing the countdown, delaying the execution. Hearings are held, experts testify, and definitions are dissected. In the end, the courts rule that Blaine does not meet the legal threshold for intellectual disability under current standards. He also attacks the science foundation of the case. Under Texas's junk science law, he argues that the bite mark evidence presented at trial, once described by the prosecution as a smoking gun, has since been discredited. It is a broader criticism of bite marks forensics, a field that has come under intense scrutiny nationwide. But for Blaine, the argument lands softly. The Court of Criminal Appeals dismisses the junk science claim, pointing to other evidence of guilt, including a confession that he reportedly made to a jail nurse. In the final years, he turns to federal civil rights laws. He files a Section 1983 lawsuit and a federal habeas petition seeking access to electronic DNA data underlying the evidence, arguing that denying him this data violates his right to due process. The Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals in New Orleans says no. The U.S. Supreme Court in Washington, D.C. says no. Across 2024 and 2025, no appellate court or systems collaborated in stopping what Texas had planned. On September 25, 2025, in Huntsville, Texas, at the Huntsville unit, the place is familiar to anyone who follows American executions. It is like the butcher, but this is actually the death house of Texas. It's home to the state's death chamber. It is where death row inmates get taken to spend their last night before being put to death. Blaine Milan was transferred here from his death row at his previous facility for his final day, in a ritual that becomes disruptingly a routine. The last meal is recorded in careful detail. Blaine ate a cheeseburger, oven-fried potatoes, green beans, pinto beans, sliced bread, scrambled eggs, country gravy, a sausage patty, pears, biscuits, tea, and water. Yes, he was indeed a fat man, even after spending decades behind bars. Texas Governor Greg Abbott does not intervene to spare his life. Instead, he authorizes the facility to proceed with the execution and gives him permission to do so. At 6:19 p.m., the lethal injection begins to flow. Witnesses later say Blaine grunted and gasped once. Then he began to snore softly. After about 2 minutes, all movement stops. Before the drugs take hold, he speaks his last words. He thanks those who have shown him kindness, compassion, empathy, love, and support. He names the chaplaincy program on death row, credits it with helping him find Jesus Christ, and urges anyone listening to accept Christ so that they might see each other again in another world. His final sentence is a plea, "Bring me home, Jesus." Outside, Rusk County District Attorney Michael Jimerson addressed the media. He called the execution an answer to the call for justice for the most helpless, and says that how a society responds to a crime like this is a measure of its civilization. Amora's grandfather was present as a witness during the execution. He chose not to speak publicly. His silence, in a way, says enough. He was devastated. The Blaine Milan case now exists in layers, as a horrific crime in a small Texas trailer, as a capital murder trial marked by graphic evidence and contested science, as well as years-long battles, struggles over intellectual disability and the reliability of forensic techniques. It sits in the same haunted corner of true crime as The Exorcism of Annalise Michel, where belief, fear, and violence blur into one another, and where possession becomes both explanation and excuse. At the center of this all is a baby who never got to grow up, who never got to choose her own story. Amora Carson, who was 13 months old when she passed away. At 6:40 p.m. on Blaine's execution date, he was pronounced dead. He slowly fell unconscious and died peacefully. This has been Strawberry Ink. Thank you for listening. If you have children, hold them close very tightly tonight. Tell them you love them. Raise them to be sweet. Send them to church. Put them in classes. Have them not worry about certain objects, about materialistic stuff. Have them take their shoes and socks off. Have them be humble. Tell them that they are safe with you. Till next time, have a good rest of your day and take care. May those affected by this horrible tragedy rest in peace.